In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to use Streamlit for Python to create a web app. So Streamlit is a web-based UI that's free to use, and it allows you to build and share high-quality apps with no front-end development experience. So we're going to be building a pretty simple app that lets us download some stock price data using an API, and then we're going to graph it. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to be using PyCharm here. And if you're not familiar with PyCharm, it's a full-featured IDE. And I'm going to leave a link for a Getting Started with PyCharm video in the description for this video if you want to learn more. Otherwise, you can just use the IDE of your choice. Okay, so I did some of this ahead of time. What I did was I went into PyCharm, I started a new project. All right, I'm going to call it Streamlit Demo here. And then, I added a Python file. Okay, and since we're starting with a fresh virtual environment, we're going to have to install some dependencies here. We're going to need pandas. We're going to need the requests library. And of course, we're going to need Streamlit. All right, so depending on your configuration in PyCharm, you may have pandas and requests, but you're definitely going to have to install Streamlit. Okay, and then later, the API I'm going to use is at end-of-day historical data. All right, and they allow you to make API calls for free. I think you get about 20 per day, and if you need more than that, then they have some subscription options that you can take a look at their website and learn about. Okay, so with Streamlit installed, we might as well go and take a look at their sample application. So I'm going to fire up the terminal here, and to run Streamlit, I'm going to run Python from the command line here, and then I'm going to call Streamlit, and their demonstration is in a file called hello. Okay, so after a couple of seconds, it fires up, and this is what a Streamlit application looks like here. All right, so we have kind of the body here with a header and some text, all right, some hyperlinks, all right, and pretty much looks like a standard web page. All right, over here on the left, we have their various demonstrations, and I'll just grab one of them. You can take a look at these others on your own. And the nice thing about their demos is that they really want you to get going with this thing. So once the demonstration is finished running, they show you the code that they use to generate it. Okay, so kind of just like that, we have a chart, all right, and down below is the code used to generate that thing. All right, so it may seem pretty complex, but okay, it's about 15 or 20 lines of code only. Okay, so they handle a lot of the formatting and placement of content on the web page, and all you have to do is worry about writing the code to get the output. All right, and then once you're happy with your application, you can request permission from Streamlit and actually publish your application live. All right, so they still allow you to do that for free, but you do have to ask them to set it up for you, and then basically you just push your files out to GitHub and tell them about your GitHub repository, and within a few seconds you have a live application that you can share with anyone you want. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how to do this on our own. Okay, and so I'm just going to start by demonstrating a couple of features in Streamlit. All right, so first of all, I'm going to have to import what I need. All right, so I'm going to import a few dependencies here. Okay, so I'm going to be using datetime to get a default start and stop date for our chart. I'm going to be using pandas to turn into a data frame, and then we're going to make our API call with requests, and then of course Streamlit is going to take care of the front end for us. All right, so let's just take a look at a couple of Streamlit elements before we write our application. All right, so I'm just going to start with st and then a dot. All right, and some of these are pretty common and self-explanatory. All right, so I can place a button out there. All right, I can place a color picker. All right, in their demo, you saw a sidebar. We are actually going to use a sidebar here. They have text boxes, date pickers, okay? And then probably the most common thing that people use is just write, all right? And write, just like it sounds, you can put whatever you want in here. Okay, and that gets rendered out in the web page. All right, the nice thing about write is you can do a lot of things with it. I can actually put some markdown in there, and now that will be an H1 when I render it. Just a couple other things. All right, so there's ST, there's a title, right? Okay, there's a header. All right, and there's too much stuff for me to demonstrate in a short video, so I'm just going to show you some common things. All right, and then if you just want to put some free-form text out there, we can actually just put a doc string out there, and it turns out the doc strings get rendered as markdown. Okay, so I will just make this an H3, I guess. All right, so let's see what that does if I try to fire this thing up in Streamlit. All right, and right now I'm still running the server that I ran for the demo, so I'm going to Control C to end that. Okay, and then to run this, I'm going to start about the same way. Okay, since it's not the demo, I'm going to tell it to run, and then I got to tell it the name of the file to run. Okay, so just like that, there is a pretty basic app, right, with at least just some text. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back in there and make some revisions. I'll leave the title here. Oh, no, actually, let me just start all over. Okay, so since I'm going to be making an API call, I need my API key here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just set a variable to store that thing in. And I'm going to read it. I got to keep it private. So I'm going to read it from this file. Okay, we'll just store it in a string. All right, I am going to set some default dates. So I'm going to get today's date, and I'm going to use date time to do that. Okay, and then I'm going to set a default charting period of a year. So we'll set a variable for the start date, and we're going to use today, and then we're going to move back 365 days. Okay, so with that done, we're going to start setting up our application. And I'm going to put the application inside of two functions. And this will allow us to rerun it as many times as we want, right? So I'm going to go out, get a chart for one stock, and then maybe I decide I want a different date range and I want to rerun it, or I want a different symbol. All right, I want to allow all that to happen in my application. All right, so I'm just going to define this as inputs. Okay, and to get the sidebar, it's Streamlit sidebar. All right, and I'll give it a header. All right, and we'll just call it chart inputs. Okay, and then I'm going to get a ticker symbol, and I'm going to store that in the sidebar again, and in a text input. All right, I'll give it a caption, and I will give it a default. All right, we'll just use Apple. Okay, we're going to give it our default start dates and end dates. All right, so that's going to be start date that I set outside, and then the end is just going to be today. All right, and then the last thing we're going to add in here is a button. All right, and that's going to be sidebar button. Okay, and then the caption on the button. Okay, and then when we run this function, I want to return all these variables. Okay, so that should be enough to sort of see what's going on here, see how our interface is shaping up. So I am going to create a main function. All right, and for right now, all the main function is going to do is to run this inputs function. All right, and I want this to be able to run from the command line. Okay, so we should be able to go and take a look at how this thing is shaping up here. I'm just going to switch back into the application. It's still running. All right, and you can see here that it knows that the source file has changed here. It hasn't done anything, right? Because they're basically looking at some static HTML. All right, so I'm going to rerun it. And we see just one input here. All right, so we have our header, right? There's that symbol. There's our button. All right, we're missing the dates. And I made a small error there. All right, nothing that prevented the application from running. All right, but I need to put these also in the sidebar. All right, so it's going to be ST sidebar. And then it's going to be a date input. And we'll give it a caption. And we'll give it a default. So we'll rerun that, and now we have all of our inputs here. Okay, and if you don't like the appearance, right, I'm zoomed in quite a bit here, and so you can just kind of zoom out, but I'm going to leave it as is. All right, and then, yeah, I can click and nothing happens yet because, okay, it is not connected to anything. But you notice in the upper right here, when I do click, it goes out and it reruns the file. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead and get our data, and to do that, I'm going to need to go out to end-of-day historical data. Okay, and then to make the call, we're going to need an endpoint. And to get the endpoint, I don't even need to set up an account and log in because they have a demo. So I'm just going to go to documentation here and click on End of Day API. All right, and then I'm going to scroll down and find the endpoint. So there it is. And this is just a sample endpoint here. So, you know, they think we want to look for McDonald's, and then I'm supposed to use this API key. All right, so it'll only work for that stock symbol, just so you can see what kind of data you get. All right, I'm going to just copy it and make some changes in my application. Okay, so this will be get data. All right, and I'm going to pass in some parameters here. We're going to pass in a ticker. We're going to get a start, and I'm going to set that default as start date. And then we're going to get an end. And again, I'm going to set that default as the end, or as today. All right, so next up, I'm going to make that call. All right, so I'll store it in a variable call, and then I'll just paste in my endpoint here, and I have to make some changes to it. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is turn this into an F string, and I'm going to replace this symbol with the ticker. Okay, and I'm going to replace this API with your key. Okay, and then the line gets kind of long, so I'm just going to break it up into two, and I'm going to add a few other parameters in here. All right, so we have our ticker symbol, we have our API token, we need a format. All right, and then I'll just say that that's JSON, and we need a from, and I'll say that that's the start, and we need a to. Okay, there's some other parameters that you can set in here, and the default, if I don't set a format, the default's going to come back as a CSV file. All right, so it's going to be easier to deal with in JSON. All right, and so then I'm just going to set a variable inside here, and we're going to make it a data frame. All right, and the data frame is going to use requests, and it's going to get our call, all right, and it's going to return it as JSON. Okay, and as simple as that, we'll just return data. Okay, let me get rid of a few of these extra lines here. All right, so we're going to update our main function here. All right, and I'm going to set those variables. Okay, so we're going to store them. And then to make the button work and to update it every time, I'm going to say when the button is true, if button, so that essentially means it's been clicked. I'm going to go and get data. It's going to use the get data function here. All right, and we're going to pass in a ticker. All right, and we're going to make sure it's in uppercase. All right, we're going to pass in the start and the end. Okay, so now we have returned data in a data frame. All right, next I'm going to write a header. And I'm going to make an F string here, and it's going to be just some description. And I'll pass in the ticker, and then we'll just give the date range as well. Okay, and then, yeah, we still need the graph. So you can actually use Matplotlib with Streamlit, all right, but I'm just going to use their built-in function line chart, and I'm going to take my data and chart the adjusted close. Okay, and that should do it. Let's go take a look at this in the browser. All right, so switch back to our application here and rerun it to get the code, and then let's see what happens when we click the button. All right, and just like that, we have our 1-year graph for Apple. All right, and just so you know, yeah, you can download this as an image. All right, if you hover over the chart, you can kind of zoom in and out and pan left and right. Okay, and then let's test it with another symbol. Let's take a look at Tesla, and you can see what happens when I change the parameter here. It wants me to press enter, and so I do, and then I get my chart. Okay, so there's Tesla. If we want a different date range, if I click in there, we get our date picker, so that's nice. I'll go back a couple of years here. Good enough. And then every time I make a change, we're going to lose our chart. So there's 2 years worth of data for Tesla. All right, and I guess I should put that symbol in uppercase there. Okay, so I hope that helps you get started with Streamlit.